Welcome back, everyone. So just like our topic 1, I will be going through topic 2, the slippery slope of life, from our Odigia textbook. So this unit, or topic 2, we actually have multiple sections we're going to go through. So I will devote a video for each one of these sections. So our first section, we're going to go through what is life, the first part of our topic 2, slippery slope of life, in our Odigia textbook. So our learning objectives, we have 3 learning objectives, just like we did for topic 1. Always a good idea to write these down and then after the video answer them or write some notes about them. So the first objective, by the end of the video, you should be able to identify and describe the properties of life. So there are 8 of them, so make sure you are able to write all of them down and describe them. Describe the levels of organization among living things, and then describe cell theory. And we actually talked about this in topic 1, so that might already be familiar with you and just be review. So you might be able to answer that already. All right, so this, it's kind of funny because this chapter starts out the same as the last topic because we already talked about biology and described it, just like the last chapter or the last topic. So we're going to just review then. So what is biology? We remember from topic 1, biology is the study of living things and their interaction with one another and their environment. So we're going to be taking a look at biology, particularly, what is life? Okay, so what makes a living thing alive? So we're going to look at the properties of life. So here are the 8 properties of life. So we're going to go through each one of these 8 properties. We're going to describe them and give examples of each. Okay, so we'll start with order, and then we'll go through sensitivity or response to stimuli. We'll go through reproduction, adaptation, growth and development, and then regulation and homeostasis, and finally energy processing. So if you didn't write down all 8, don't worry, because we're going to go through each one individually, starting with order. So let's start with order. So all of our living things, whether it's a single cell or a complex multicellular creature like our toad here, is highly organized. So if we take a look, for example, a single cell is a highly organized structure. Inside that cell, it has a nucleus that contains the DNA. It has ribosomes that make the proteins. It has little vesicles that transport nutrients from one side of the cell to another. So it's a highly organized structure. When we look at this toad here, this is a highly organized organism. It consists of organ systems. It has, a respiratory system. It has a digestive system. It has a reproductive system. It has a muscular system. And then its respiratory system contains different organs. It has, the lungs. It has the circulatory system that carries the oxygen from the lungs to the cells. Okay, so things like that. It has tissues that are basically a collection of cells that perform the same function, and then it has the cells themselves. So each cell has is the smallest unit of life. So our toad represents a highly organized structure. So life is ordered. It's a highly organized structure. Life is in order. Okay? So we are very complicated and organized. So the next property of life is that life is basically, it responds to stimuli. It's sensitive to the environment. So have you ever come across a plant where if you touch it, it kind of retracts or droops? So this is an example of a very sensitive plant, this Mimosa Odigia. And it will actually, if you touch the leaves, if you just kind of touch the tips of the leaves here, it starts to retract and droop and fold in. So it's responding to that stimulus, and so it's kind of retracting away. And then after a few minutes, it just returns to normal. So it does that to kind of protect itself, probably from an herbivore. So living things, they respond to stimuli. So I'm going to show you a video on the next slide. This YouTube video will show you a response to stimuli, basically with sunflowers tracking sunlight throughout the day. Oops.
If you notice that your sunflowers move a little, you're not losing it. They might just be following the sun across the sky. Storm Team 10's Matt Brooks caught up with a biologist to find out why your sunflowers might be pointing in the opposite direction at the end of each day.
No, you're not going crazy. Young sunflowers really do follow the sun from east to west and back on most days. Biologists and researchers say it has to do with a sort of internal clock.
Just like you and me that regulates our sleep patterns, plants have a circadian clock as well. And in the case of solar tracking, they help to have the plant follow the sun throughout the day.
The sunlight-sensitive leaves, along with the internal circadian clock, help to physically tilt the sunflower.
That causes hormones to be distributed differently on the different sides of the plants, and that causes unequal growth.
You'll find that after a while, your sunflowers may just look east once they're fully grown.
But there's a benefit to them facing east when they're mature, and that's to help attract pollinators in that warm morning sun.
If you would like to learn more about the science of moving sunflowers, just head over to our website, WTHITV.com.
Okay, so from that video, you saw how the sunflowers are responding to the position of the sun throughout the day. So it allows them to not only get more pollinators to their sunflower, the actual flower of the plant, but also allows their leaves to get more sun hitting the surface of the leaves. So that's responding to the environmental stimulus. So that was the second property of life. The third property of life, we get into reproduction. So in order for us to make more cells, the first thing we need to do is we need to replicate our DNA. So each one of our cells contains DNA, and that DNA is our blueprint, okay, so of ourselves. So it contains all of the information to make another one of us. So we need to, first of all, copy our DNA, and then we need to transfer that to, and then to divide our cells. Okay, so and we'll talk about that later on in the term. So we have to replicate our DNA, then divide our cells. So that way, each daughter cell has a copy of our DNA. And that way, when we reproduce, our genes are passed along to our offspring. So this explains why our offspring looks similar to our parents. Okay, so like for example, you can take a look at these kittens. They're so cute. And you can imagine that their parents, they probably look similar to them, right? They're probably cats, right? They're cats. They probably have, fuzzy, ears and cute little noses, and they probably have blue eyes like these kittens have. So they're not dogs. The offspring look similar to their parents because the parents pass those genes on, their DNA on to their offspring through reproduction. Now that also explains adaptation. So living organisms are fit. Okay, that term fit also means adapted. So they're adapted to their environment. So this process of adaptation is a consequence of evolution. So that's due to inherited traits enhancing their reproductive potential in offspring. So why do you think kittens are so cute? Well, if they were ugly, their parents wouldn't want to keep them and provide so much care to them. Okay, so that's why usually babies are so cute. So it makes it so that the parents want to actually take care of them. Also, in general, just think of cats. What are some things that cats? What are some adaptations that they have that make them successful? So they have retractable claws. So the claws allow them to grab on to their prey or allow them to climb up trees or things like that. So those are adaptations that they have to make them successful predators. Okay, or their whiskers. Look at how long their whiskers are. So it allows them to respond to stimuli a little bit better, so that they can fit through spaces and know exactly how much room that their body can fit through and respond to stimuli. So those are all examples of adaptations. And those adaptations, they are a consequence of evolution. So those inherited traits that were passed on from generation to generation through reproduction. And then finally, the third, this third slide with the same picture, growth and development. So organisms, they grow and develop based on the instructions encoded by their genes. So we have our DNA, which we inherited from our parents, and those genes, they are our instruction book, they're our blueprint to make us. So when we started off life as a single cell, a zygote, and then that zygote divided and divided and divided until we were a clump of cells called a blastocyst. And then very early in development, that blastocyst started to differentiate, into a slightly more complex set of cells. And then eventually it became a little bit more complex until we get into like the embryo stage. And then from there it gets a little bit more complex and differentiates into the fetus. And then finally we're born and we look like a baby human. And then from there, we start getting bigger and develop, more features and stuff like that. And so, you start growing and developing even more. And then, teenage puberty hits and you develop even more. And so growth and development is based on those instructions that are encoded by our DNA. Okay? So what was that? Number 5? So I think we're on number 6 for our process of our properties of life. You'll have to keep track on your own because I forget. So regulation. So all organisms require regulatory mechanisms to coordinate internal functions. So if you think about it, we need to, be able to, within our bodies, our cells need to obtain nutrients. And then the cells, they will produce waste products. So we have to have a way for our body to remove waste from our body. We need to be able to cool our body. We need to protect our cells and our body from environmental issues. So we have to have that regulation take place. So our body has to have those regulatory mechanisms to be able to, coordinate all those, things that happen inside of our body. Okay. And then we have homeostasis. So homeostasis refers to the relatively stable internal environment required to maintain life. So even though we have, all of this, these things going on inside of our body, we have to remove waste, we have to take in nutrients, we have to cool the body, we have to, protect the body, all that stuff. Inside, it's still pretty consistent. It's stable, we create a very stable internal environment. Our bodies usually, the temperature is pretty much the same all the time. It's always, right around 98 degrees, no matter what. I mean, it might go up a little bit when we're sick, but it's not going to change that much. Due to thermoregulation, our body, keeps pretty consistent. When it gets really hot, we sweat to cool ourselves down. We have ways to, keep us warm. We want to put on more clothing. Our, polar bear that lives in the, Arctic regions of our planet, it has, ways to keep itself warm even in that cold climate. So it has, really thick fur. If I looked under the fur, it actually has black skin. So that black skin can absorb the sunlight. So that keep itself warm, as well as that thick fur, and then it has dense layer of fat to keep itself warm. Our body has a constant pH, so like our blood is slightly alkaline, a little bit on the basic side. So if our blood starts to become a little bit more acidic, then we have ways to bring the pH back up. Okay, so we maintain constant pH balance in our body. Energy, even in the middle of the night, you're still, your cells still need energy. So you need a constant supply of glucose and things like that for your body to continue to work, so that you can breathe and regulate yourself in the middle of the night. So that's why we have fat storages in our body, so that we can rely on that to get us through until the next meal. So, that's homeostasis. We have maintained, internal conditions to, keep us, relatively stable, even if the outside environment is changing. Okay, so that's number 7 of our property of life. And then finally, we have energy processing. So organisms use a source of energy for their metabolic activities. So what is the source of energy for plants? So plants take energy from the sun, and they use that energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugars. Okay, so they can use those sugars to then convert that chemical energy into cellular energy. Animals, we can't do that, right? So we can't just sit out in the sun and make sugar from that. So we have to consume the chemical energy through eating, and then we can take the chemical energy from our food and convert it into cellular energy. So all living things have to process energy, okay? Because we can't make energy, okay? That's defies a scientific law. Remember that term, scientific law, from Tools of the Trade, part 1, or topic 1. So that scientific law, first law of thermodynamics, we can't create nor destroy energy. We just can convert it from one form to another. So energy processing is just taking one form of energy and converting it to another. So we can convert chemical energy into cellular energy. Take food, convert it to cellular energy. All right, so here is a review question for us. A small green frog jumps into the pond when you poke it. Don't poke frogs, that's not very nice. Which property, characteristic of life, is the frog demonstrating? Is it A, response to stimuli, B, reproduction? Don't choose B. I hope the frog is not thinking you're reproducing with it. That would be weird. C, adaptation, or D, homeostasis. If you choose A, I would agree with you. It's responding to you, the stimuli, for poking it. Okay? Not very nice. And again, reproduction, that's so weird. Why would it think, are you poking it because you want to reproduce with it? Ew. Okay. Moving on, so the next part of this, what is life, is the levels of organization. So remember, one of the properties of life is order. So let's talk about the levels of order or organization of life. So we can take the smallest unit of life, which is a cell, and we can look inside of it, and we can break it down even further. Okay, so if we take a look at the smallest unit of anything on Earth, okay, the smallest unit of matter is called an atom. So a smallest unit of matter that retains the property of an element is called an atom. So if you're familiar with chemistry at all and have ever used a periodic table, so periodic tables, those are those things that, are on the wall of a chemistry classroom or lab, and they have like, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, they're all, in a chart on the wall. Those are elements. And an element is basically, atoms are is it a unit of, it's an element. It's just a unit of matter that retains the property of an element. So I can have an atom of oxygen, an atom of carbon, an atom of hydrogen. Okay? Now, if I have two atoms, or at least two atoms, held together with a chemical bond, I can form a molecule. So I can have two atoms of oxygen held together by a chemical bond, and I would have an oxygen molecule. I can have, an atom of carbon and an atom of oxygen bond together with a chemical bond and form a molecule known as carbon monoxide. Okay, so, or I can have carbon dioxide, which is a carbon with two oxygens bonded together. So molecules, they are basically, they have two or more atoms bonded together by a chemical bond. Okay, so that's one step up of an atom. So molecules contain atoms. Macromolecules contain multiple molecules. Okay, so large molecules formed by polymerization. So polymerization is basically just taking molecules and taking them, combining them together through a process. Well, should I talk about? I'm not going to talk about it right now because we'll talk about it in the next unit, I believe. Yes, the next unit. But this is where we take something like, if we take a molecule such as like glucose, or and then we take multiple molecules of glucose and we undergo a reaction, which is called dehydration or condensation, and we end up putting them together to form a more complex molecule, a macromolecule called a carbohydrate, or a like something like cellulose or starch. So macromolecules are just a bunch of smaller molecules held together with bonds. Okay, so they form large molecules. So macromolecules are made of a lot of smaller molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. And then finally we get organelles. So organelles are aggregates of macromolecules surrounded by membranes. So think of a nucleus. So a nucleus is an organelle of a cell. So it's got multiple types of macromolecules in there. And those macromolecules are made of molecules that are made of atoms. So remember the organelles. I like to think of organelles as the organs of a cell. So like the nucleus is kind of like the boss of the cell that tells the cell, houses the DNA. So the cell itself is the smallest fundamental unit of life. So we already talked about, or actually in the next slide, excuse me, but we already talked about a little bit about this in topic 1, prokaryotic cells versus eukaryotic cells. We briefly talked about it, but we'll go more into detail in the next video with prokaryotes versus eukaryotes. But we have two types of cells. I can take every single cell in the entire universe or world, Earth, I should say, and divide it into two categories. They're either prokaryotes or eukaryotes. And the distinguishing characteristic, or one of the distinguishing characteristics, is if it has a nucleus. So those that don't have a nucleus are called prokaryotes. So these are single-celled organisms. They do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. So those would be like bacteria or archaeans. And then the cells that do have a nucleus, such as animals, fungi, plants, protists, they are called eukaryotes. Okay, so these cells are the smallest unit of life. Anything smaller than a cell is not considered alive. Okay, it doesn't have all those properties of life. So like a macromolecule is not considered alive because it doesn't have all the properties of life. It can't process energy. It can't, adapt. It can't, it doesn't have all of the properties of life. It may have some of the properties of life. So for example, it does have some order, but it doesn't have all the properties of life. So cells have all 8 properties of life. So it's the smallest fundamental unit of life. Okay, and cells are made of organelles. Organelles are made of macromolecules. Macromolecules are made of molecules, and molecules are made of atoms. Okay, now if we take cells and we group similar cells carrying out similar functions together, we form tissues. So if we look at humans, we actually have 4 types of tissues found in our bodies. We have connective tissues, so that's like blood and stuff like that. We have muscular tissues, so muscle. We have epithelial tissues, so that's like tissue surrounding like your organs or your skin, and nervous tissues, so think of like your neurons and brain cells and things like that. Okay, so those are similar cells carrying out similar or related functions. So those are tissues of the body. And then if we have, couple types of tissue or multiple tissues grouped together to perform a common function, that's called an organ. So for example, if I took a look at the heart actually has multiple types of tissue in it. So you can think of the heart, sure, it's got a bunch of muscle, that's, you can see the constricting of the muscle that's pumping the heart. But, the reason why it's pumping, it's powered by electrical impulses, which are due to the neurons, the nervous tissue. It's surrounded by epithelial tissue, so there's multiple types of tissue that are found. Blood is the connective tissue. So there's, all 4 types of tissue found in that organ. So those tissues are grouped together, performing a common function for that heart organ. And then organ systems are functionally related organs of the body. So think of the circulatory system. You have the heart, but what's the heart connected to? It's connected to arteries and veins. And those arteries and veins are carrying blood to the lungs, and to release the carbon dioxide that have built up in your digestive or in your from your cells, and to get rid of the carbon dioxide out of your body and to gain more fresh oxygen for your cells. Okay, so think of organ systems. They are working together so that your body can work functionally together. And then finally we have you, an organism, so a living entity. Okay, now when we're looking at levels of organism, some organisms stop at the cell stage. So if we're talking about bacteria, they don't go above the cell stage. They are single-celled. They don't have tissues, organs, organ systems, because they are a cell. They don't have multiple cells. So just be aware that some organisms stop. The cell and the organism is the same thing. Okay? Now, we can stop here at the organism. So we have the organism is made of the organ systems that are made of organs, that are made of tissues, that are made of cells, that are made of organelles, that are made of macromolecules, that are made of molecules, that are made of atoms. But we can also go further and expand further from there. Okay? So we can talk beyond that. So if we have groups of organisms of the same species living in the same area, that is called a population. So I can think of you and your fellow students in this course. You're a population, okay? So you're the population of students taking this Bio 101 course, or the population of people that are living in, the Portland metro area or the state of Oregon. We're all population. Or you can think of the population of, squirrels living in my backyard or whatever it is. So populations are individuals of the same species living within a specific area. Or we can get even broader than that, and we can look at a community. So a community level of organization is the sum of populations inhabiting a particular area. So it's not just thinking of one species, but all different species of living things. So I could look at, not only the squirrels in my backyard, but I can look at the plants and the other animals, okay? The birds, the bees, all the other things that are interacting, and see how the living things are interacting with each other. So community involves all the living things interacting with each other in a particular area. So this includes like predator-prey relationships. It includes like food chains, food webs. It can include like different symbiotic relationships, like those that benefit each other, like think of the bumblebees and the flowers, things like that. So communities are interactions between living things within an environment. Ecosystems go even broader because we include the abiotic or non-living parts of the environment. So we're not only including all the living things, we're looking at the climate, we're looking at the water in the area, like how much precipitation, if there's rivers, streams, that kind of thing. We're looking at the topography, is it mountainous, that kind of thing. We're looking at the soil quality, that kind of thing. So the ecosystem includes the abiotic as well as the biotic component. And then finally, we can study at the biosphere level. So that's the collection of all ecosystems representing the zones of life on Earth. So that's the big picture, the living sphere of the globe. Okay? So these are all the levels of organization, starting from the smallest matter, unit of matter, the atom, all the way to the living sphere of the Earth, the biosphere. Okay, so here's kind of just looking at most of the levels in one slide. So you're thinking of the smallest unit of life being the cell, and then the cell being composed of organelles, okay? And then a clump of cells with the same function forming tissue, and then the tissue, multiple tissues making up organs working together to form an organ system, organ systems working together to create a fully functioning organism, and then multiple organisms of the same species living in the same area forming a population. Populations of multiple populations living together in the same area would be a community. And then the community including the abiotic components forming an ecosystem, and then all ecosystems on Earth forming the biosphere. Alright, so let's take a look at this visual connection question. So this is straight out of the textbook, the Odigia textbook. So which of the following statements is false? So tissues exist within organs, which exist within organ systems. So do tissues exist within organs, which exist within organ systems? Is that true? Do tissues exist within organs? Yeah. Do organs exist within organ systems? Yeah, so that's true. Communities exist within populations? Do communities exist within populations? I think it's the other way around, right? Populations that exist within communities. So that one might be false. Let's see if there's any other false ones. Organelles exist within cells? Yep. Which exists within tissues? Yep, that works. Communities exist within ecosystems? Yep. Which exists within biosphere? Yep. So this one is the false one. So communities do not exist with populations. It should be switched. Populations exist within communities. Communities exist within ecosystems. Here's a review question. The smallest unit of biological structure that meets the fundamental requirements of living is what? Is it the organ, the organelle, the cell, or the macromolecule? So which one possesses all 8 characteristics of life? That would be the cell. And then here's another review question. Which of the following sequences represents the hierarchy of biological organization from the most inclusive to the least complex? So what does inclusive mean? So it includes all to least complex. Okay, that's, the smallest. So which one's the most inclusive to least complex? So organelle to tissue, well, that would be smallest to biggest, so that's wrong. Organ to organism, that's big to small. That could be right. Let's see. Okay, so we have to go from big to small. So organ to organism, that's wrong direction. Organism to community, again, that's wrong direction. So it has to be this one because they're all going the wrong direction. So biosphere to ecosystem. Okay, so that's big to smaller. Ecosystem to community, that's bigger to smaller. Community to population, that's bigger to smaller. Population to organism. So that's the correct one. It's going from most inclusive to least So that's the correct one. All right, so the biosphere includes everybody, whereas of the ones that are least complex, it would be the organism. All right, so this first part of our topic 2 ends with cell theory. So we talked a little bit about this when we were talking about microscopes, but so I'll just kind of review it. It's the same slide as what we talked about when we talked about microscopes. But in this case, it specifies the 2 parts to cell theory. So all living things are made of cells, and all cells come from pre-existing cells. So those are the 2 requirements in cell theory. So all living things are made of cells, and all cells come from pre-existing cells. So if we come across a cell, we know that it's alive, okay? It's because all living things are made of cells. And we know that cells came from pre-existing cells. So we've never seen a cell just poof out of nowhere, okay? So it came from a pre-existing cell. And we know that some organisms, they're just made of one cell. So for example, bacteria, there are some unicellular eukaryotic cells like our protists, or some organisms can be made of many cells, such as humans. This plant is made of multiple cells, you can see here. Some cells are simple, like our prokaryotic cell, they lack a nucleus, or they could be complex, like our eukaryotic cell. Like our plant here has, you can see each one of its cells has a nucleus in the center. Plants and animals have eukaryotic cells, like our plant shown here. Bacteria have prokaryotic cells. They don't have a nucleus. Okay, so those are just some stuff I included from the bacteria slide, or microscope slide, excuse me. But the main thing is that cell theory states all living things are made of cells, and cells come from pre-existing cells. So make sure you remember that. All right, so we're done with our first part of topic 2. So You should be able to write down off of memory, hopefully, the 8 properties of life and be able to describe them. You should be able to describe the levels of organization among living things. So be able to describe going from a cell, the smallest unit of life, what cells are made of. So think of like organelles, organelles are made of macromolecules. Remember that, by the way, not all cells have organelles, right? So some of these get skipped, right? Not all organisms have organs, like, some of those get skipped. So just remember that with our organization of life. But be able to go in either direction from the cell. So be able to go deeper inside the cell and be able to get bigger, and then pass the organism level to the biosphere. And then be able to describe cell theory, so the 2 parts of cell theory. Okay? So our next video, we're going to get into the second part of topic 2, so how are prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells different?